Hi and welcome back. I'm very excited. This is part 2 of my basic training series. We're going to be taking a look at Campaigns in Russia, the Arduous Beginning, Army Group Center, June through August 1941, designed by Frank Chadwick and published in 2009 by Victory Point Games as part of their Campaigns in World War II series. Okay, here's a peek at the western half of the map. Here's Minsk over here, with railways crisscrossing it, the Garrison Infantry Corps in Brest, fortified city hex, and the whole western front with the Soviet units right up against Army Group Center. This game is a game of many firsts for me. Not only is it my first World War II game, but also it's each unit, many of the units have steps. They have this full strength side, and then you flip it over to find its reduced strength side. Another new thing for me is that a lot of these Soviet mechanized units have a separate attack and defense strength, but we don't find that out until it's actually in combat. Until then, it's a mystery. So there's that, and also another interesting thing to note is, aside from the fact that there's a stacking limit of 2, only one unit from each hex can target a particular enemy unit. So for an example, up here we have this Soviet infantry army in the forest up here at the north. If we wanted to attack it from all 3 adjacent hexes as a German player, we would need to assign 1 from each of the 3 hexes. So for example, we could have this the 3 German panzers attacking that army unit, and then down here we could have the German infantry corps with a combat strength of 8 attacking either of these 2 units during the same combat phase. You'll notice that some of these hexes have either a red star or a black cross in them, and I'm sure you can figure out that that's to help you set up the game. The Soviet player sets up first, and they have 3 infantry army units that they can place along the western front here, and 5 mech corps units. The only exception is that 2 army units cannot be adjacent to one another. The mechanized corps units with the mystery combat value, that is a mystery to both players. So they're placed face down, their combat strength face down and shuffled, and then randomly dispersed. So it's not to simulate some sort of fog of war mechanic. It's really more to simulate the unpredictability in the reliability of those units. Sometimes they can be really weak, but sometimes they could be really strong, and neither player will know until that unit is attacked or is attacking. Here's a super close-up of Minsk. Some hexes have these little symbols denoting that one unit of each type should be placed there in initial setup. So this particular hex, the major city of Minsk, starts out with 1 infantry army unit and 1 Soviet mechanized corps. So we've done that. And that goes for a number of other city hexes along the map. You can see down here Baranovich. I, by the way, do not know how to pronounce these town names. So we got 1 there, and then moving along towards the eastern border we have Gomel, In the south, 2 units there. And then further north, we have Velikie Luki with an army unit there. The German player also has at his disposal 2 air support markers that can be used during battle to shift the column on the combat table by 2 or by 1 in his favor. Further back over here, you can see that the combat results table is right on the map. Can you figure out the breaking point? I don't know. It looks to be somewhere around 3 or 4. Column 3 or 4. It's based on a ratio. I believe that's new to me. I've already kind of played around with this game, so I'm a little more familiar with it, but there are a lot of exchange results, a lot of retreat results, and the defender, when they retreat, they must retreat 2 hexes. Up here I've placed the terrain effects chart that also contains the game turn track. We have movement effects, combat effects, and notes for open terrain, forest terrain, swamp. Swamp is new to me too. City hexes, major cities, fortification, river, railroad, and the hexes with stars or crosses. Those are the setup locations I've just talked about. Here we have the 7 turns, and take a closer look. You can see that these little red boxes, they denote the number and type of reinforcement units that the Soviet player receives during the first 3 turns. And on the right side, there is a number, kind of a replacement points that each side can spend. The exclamation mark is for the German player, and the red star again is for the Soviet player. They can spend those points to either replace previously eliminated units back onto the map on their reduced side, or to flip over a previously reduced strength unit. A couple of exceptions to the replacements when it comes to the Soviet player: they can only replace up to one Soviet mechanized corps unit per turn. And then the Soviet 6th Mechanized Corps, which is extremely, way more powerful than the others. It has a combat strength of 8, defense value of 4, and movement of 6. Once that's destroyed, it can never be replaced. Also, I should note that if you spend a replacement point to replace a previously eliminated unit onto the map, you cannot spend another, even if you have extra, to then flip it back to its full strength side. Similar to what we saw in Fading Glory, there are these edges with dark borders, black for the German player and another red one on the other side, the eastern edge of the map for the Soviet player. It's along these hexes that the player may enter their replacement units, as long as the hex is not in an enemy zone of control or occupied by an enemy unit or already occupied by 2 of your own units. The player also has the option to place units in friendly controlled city hexes that are in communication with their map edge. A city is friendly controlled if your units were the last to pass through it or enter it. All cities start out under Soviet control. And it's in communication if you can trace a path of hexes from that city all the way to your side of the map, the western edge, the eastern edge for the Soviet player and the western edge for the German player. That path that you trace, excluding the origin hex, no part of it can be in an enemy zone of control, nor can it be containing an enemy unit. So it has to be a path of friendly hexes. I should probably explain how to win the game. As the German player, you win the game by controlling all of the 12 city hexes by the end of turn 7, by the end of the last turn. If you only control 11 out of the 12, the game ends in a draw. If you control any less, then it's a Soviet victory. On the back of the this cover sheet thing, there's this cool historical progress in game turns that I almost missed. But it covers each of the turns and roughly what occurred historically. So it's a very interesting read. And I might try to play along with it. I haven't done that yet. I also recommend reading up on the frontier battles, the opening stages of Operation Barbarossa, specifically the Battle of Bialystok, Minsk, and then the Battle of Smolensk. Very, very interesting to know what occurred while you're playing, although things like weather, of course, and other things like that are not represented in the game. It's interesting, and I'm curious to see how that kind of turnover that occurred, starting with a very strong opening for the Germans as they took control of Minsk, and then the eventual slowing down caused by weather and the strengthening of Russian defenses that took place on the road to Smolensk, which actually took a huge toll in the sense that I think that it actually caused the Germans to reconsider their initial strategy of this drive to Moscow and to actually split army groups, center north and south of the road to Moscow instead of going straight for the heart. So that's a huge turning point, and I'm excited to play through and to get to see how maybe if any of that is can be manifested in my plays.